Season 7 is known as one of Drag Race's worst seasons, especially at the time of its airing. It follows up what a lot of people consider to be the golden age of Drag Race, which is seasons 4, 5, and 6. And while I do think that this season suffers from a few glaring issues, overall, I love season 7. It has a perfect blend of character, camp, fun, fights, fashion, and performance. It harkens back to a time where the queens weren't afraid to be bitchy, where social media was just starting to become huge in the fandom, and when Drag Race was starting to get to its modern iteration, but still had a lot of aspects of the older seasons. And I think that is very obvious watching this season in 2023. So, like we always do, we're going to look at every episode, break down the challenges, the placements, and of course, the Riggory. This is the Riggory of Drag Race Season 7. But before we get into that, Derek, camera's over here. Buddy. Sorry, I am actually listening to my new Raycon Everyday earbuds. And wow, that noise isolation must really work because I can't hear a word that I'm saying. Now, I am an avid podcast listener, an avid music listener, and what I look for in a pair of earbuds is versatility, durability, and a good price point. And Raycon has all of this. Raycon's everyday earbuds actually have over 50,000 5-star reviews, which I'm not shocked by because when I first put these in my ears, I was like, holy cow. So my favorite feature of these is actually the 3 different sound profiles that you can toggle through. So when I'm listening to alternative, I'll use the balanced sound profile because it's pretty universal and it just kind of levels out the sound profile. And then I'll switch to the bass profile when I'm listening to like pop music so I can hear all of those beats and the bass. So for me personally, I think Raycon is the full package when it comes to earbuds. And what's great about Raycon is they want you to feel great about your purchase. So they offer buy now, pay later options, as well as an easy and free return guarantee with your Raycon purchase. Raycon is truly one of the most versatile earbuds I have ever tried. So if you're ready to buy something small with a big impact, click the link in the description box below or go to buyraycon.com/thedragdetective where you can get 15% off your Raycon purchase. So thank you so much, Raycon, for sponsoring today's video, and happy listening, everybody. Also, quick shout out to 2 of my very good friends. I love them both so much, Brian and Lene, who are sporting some of my merch. If you want to get some merch and be featured on the channel, go to thedragdetectiveshop.com. If you already have merch, send me pics of you in it, and I will put you in a future video. And thank you, Brian and Lene, for being amazing friends. I love you both so much. So, going to Season 7, a few of the main critiques this season gets from fans is that there are a majority comedy challenges, but then with a cast of mostly fashion queens. But also there being a lack of rootable queens near the end of the season, and a bad edit for its winner. And on this rewatch, I definitely see where people are coming from with all of these critiques. I honestly think Season 7 is one of the most unique Drag Race seasons just in the feel of it. The old school versus the new school storyline that begins in episode 1 and lasts throughout the entire season makes all of the episodes feel very concise and like we're on a journey. This isn't just like an episode to episode thing. Like all of this is one big story. Comparing it to Season 15, which is airing right now, each queen that goes home kind of feels like they have a storyline on Season 7, with the exception of maybe like Sasha Belle. This makes these episodes feel like they have more weight to them, which is, I think, a stark contrast to Season 15, where not many queens have any storyline whatsoever. So whenever they go home, it's like, cool, let's move on. The queens on Season 7 all feel like pieces of this huge narrative puzzle. Even queens not a part of the main old school versus new school arc, like Jaden or Katya, have their own personal arcs going on throughout their time on the season. Each queen feels like they have a reason for being there, and I think that makes this season feel very impactful and cohesive. I actually mapped out the general arcs of this season. Most of the queens do fall into the new school versus the old school, with Sasha, Jaden, Max, and Katya outside of this narrative for the most part. But Sasha really doesn't last long enough to get a story outside of being unpolished. Jaden gets an underdog arc where we also dive into her personal and family history, and I feel like she's kind of the emotional core of this story. Max and Katya are kind of on the periphery of the old school versus the new school arc, but both are seen forging relationships with both sides and mostly staying out of the arguments. But Max's main arc is about her prudishness, her inability to be authentic with the girls, and her eventual downfall. Katya's arc is about her immense talent, but her inability to see this in herself and the constant doubt, self-sabotage, and anxiety that she faces throughout the competition. I really think the way I'm able to map out all of these queens and their positions on the season is unique for Drag Race. If I were to try and do this on season 15, it would be basically impossible. But it's also this map that helps determine and explain almost all of the riggory on this season. Because the queens are all so heavily tied to these narrative arcs, production has to be careful with what queens they let go when. They can't have these narratives end before they're fully fleshed out and explored. And looking at the boot order, it really does follow which queens are least important and most important to these narratives. So, without further ado, let's start breaking down the premiere episode. So, episode 1. We have a 3-part challenge. First, they have to walk 2 separate runways, a fall and a spring collection, and then they have to make kind of like a striptease resort wear look, showing off a nude illusion underneath. So that's a lot for these queens to do in one episode, especially for back then. But everything placement-wise and critique-wise checks out for the most part, except for one glaring instance of riggory, which we'll break down in a minute. This episode really sets up a Violet versus Fame rivalry, with Violet narrowly inching ahead of Fame to snag the win here. Kennedy is also in the top, which I don't 100% agree with, especially when they give Jasmine the critique of her fall look being kind of old and stale. Kennedy's fashion show was definitely a little underwhelming in the same way, but she had one of the best resort wear presentations, so I think that does make up for it. Our bottom 4 are Sasha, Jasmine, Kandy, and Tempest. Now, Sasha, Jasmine, and Tempest I fully agree with, but Kandy's fashion show looks were both clean, polished, fun, and her resort wear look wasn't anything crazy, but it was solid, and she had a nice nude illusion afterwards. But she was thrown into the bottom fully because of her beard and her rivalry with Tempest. When it comes to Kandy's critiques, we don't even really hear anything about her looks, just her makeup. And when you look at Sasha Belle, who had a very underwhelming and wonky resort wear look, Kandy, I think, should have been safe as fuck. But to have the premiere lip sync be 2 queens who didn't get along right off the bat is a better TV moment. It's a better narrative for the episode. And it immediately pits the old school and the new school against each other. And this is kind of an eerie premonition for how the end of the season plays out, with new school ultimately coming out on top over old school. In the end, I don't think Tempest really stood a chance against Kandy or Sasha to Geronimo, but it sucks losing one of the comedy queens right off the bat, especially in such a comedy-heavy season. If Tempest had just been able to make it past this first episode, I think she has a really good run. But I don't think with this lip-sync song that was ever really in the cards for her. I'm glad that the show has kind of uplifted Tempest lately with her appearances on season 14 and on other WoW content, but I would love to see her come back for All Stars, honestly. I think she could really do a good job. And she offers a very unique style and flavor of drag that we really don't get to see very often. So we move on to episode 2, the Glamazonian Airways Challenge. We start off this episode with a mini challenge where the queens are attacked by leaf blowers. And this is the kind of mini challenge that basically anybody can win. I talk about how mini challenge winners can be picked ahead of time by production to further certain arcs or give certain queens a boost in screen time. And this episode, I think, definitely does that. Ginger and Trixie win and become team captains, and this seemed very deliberate to me. Both of them are very tight with the opposing cliques that are forming. And this ensures that the new school and old school dynamics will continue into this challenge and into this episode. And, well, it does. Trixie picks Max, Fame, Pearl, and Violet, who are the main new school queens, and Ginger picks Kennedy, Jasmine, and Kasha, who have together formed the Old Lady Brigade. The Bitter Old Lady Brigade. When it comes to placements, this isn't judged in teams, which I think does make sense, honestly, because there were standouts and flops on both sides. But Katya and Sasha were definitely the weakest, with Ginger being a great leader and Kasha having the single best performance. I almost said this was rigged, that Kasha didn't win, but I don't think Ginger did a bad enough job to not warrant the win. But now that I'm recording this, the whole episode was kind of about how Ginger didn't feel comfortable doing dance and, her overcoming that. So maybe this should be a rigged moment because they're like, okay, nice job. We're going to reward you for fulfilling the storyline with a win over someone like Kasha, who really doesn't have much to do this episode. But Sasha Belle is sent home by Katya, and this all checks out. Like I said, Sasha is the one queen of the season who doesn't have any storyline, and this kind of is just another example of the second out curse. Now let's move on to an iconic episode of Drag Race history, the Shakespeare episode, the first time we ever saw Ru pop off on the queens, at least I think it was. We have another mini challenge where one from each side are chosen as the winners. This time it's Max and Kennedy, and they become team captains. Now, we don't really get another old school versus new school team dynamic though, because Max is a smart player, and she chooses both Ginger and Kasha, knowing that they will be good at acting and at comedy and a good person to have on her team. Now, Pearl and Violet end up on Team Kennedy, and this is where things get really interesting, seeing the sides forced to interact and work together. This episode really just comes down to Max being able to work well with everyone and keep everyone in line, and Kennedy not being able to do this, shooting down Violet's good ideas because they're coming from Violet, and bringing the team down because of it. Now, Violet, in the start of the season, is a very interesting character. And I'm saying character because these are, highly edited episodes of television that are showing us a pretty one-dimensional side of these queens. But she's bitchy, narcissistic, she has little patience, and we hear a lot of other queens talking shit about her, how unlikable she is, how difficult she is to be around. But the edit still doesn't push her into full villain territory. Like in this episode, the edit is telling us that she is in the right when she's saying we all need to work together and go over this performance together, and Kennedy is in the wrong by shooting her down. And I think this is kind of priming us for her redemption arc midway into the season. Kennedy and Jasmine also kind of have very interesting villain arcs. I think their arcs are specifically more villainous than Violet's is, even if Violet's is definitely more, punchier earlier in the season than theirs are. They very quickly become friends, Kennedy and Jasmine. And, Jasmine is a huge fan of Kennedy going into the season. They're shown to be the closest of the Bitter Old Lady Brigade. And again, this season does such a good job of ping-ponging between who is in the right and who is in the wrong on both sides, at least this early on. While episode 2, we see Pearl and Fame are being chastised for not having stage presence or performance abilities from the Old Lady Brigade. Now, this episode, we see Jasmine and Kennedy being chastised for not being team players, for being too self-centered to look at the bigger picture around them, and for saying some really not nice things about some of the new school girls, and saying it to their faces. Kennedy and Jasmine both end up getting pitted against each other in the lip sync, which, makes sense both narratively and based on their performances. Kennedy let her team down as their leader, and Jasmine's performance was a train wreck.
If I'm not here cheerleader, it's purely fan fiction.
On the other end, we have Max getting the win and her entire team being in the top. And this also made sense to, I think, be judged in teams, considering how terrible overall Team Kennedy was. But let's talk about Max. Max has a great showing in this episode. She leads her team to victory. She calms Jaden down when she starts freaking out on set and starting to shut down. She has a solid runway, and it's Ginger and Max who are able to cross the generational lines and who are then rewarded for it in this episode. Jasmine received a lot of hate on the season from fans, and by watching the edit, it's not a shock why. I mean, she does get a very one-sided, one-dimensional edit. We only see her when she's shit-talking the younger queens and their drag. The show, I think, really kind of makes an example out of her, since her rigid ideas of drag is what sends her home. She refuses to put on a beard in the Bearded Runway Challenge. She's chastised for that. She refuses to be able to work well with the younger queens, and her performance fails as a result. The edit dunks on her so hard, but I'm glad that in the years since, the fandom has turned around and been able to see Jasmine as a multi-dimensional person rather than the caricature that we see on season 7. Now, episode 4 is, I think, the most rigged episode of the season. But I think looking at the bigger picture, it makes sense why they do what they do. So it is the spoof challenge, where they have to take RuPaul songs and make them into parodies. They let the girls make their own teams this time, and we see the 3 remaining members of the Old Lady Brigade team up. And we see that the 3 kind of leftovers are Jaden, Violet, and Max. Now, I wouldn't say that any group is hands down the best. Again, I think there's good and bad in each group, so it makes sense that this was judged individually. RuPaul names the top queen in each group during the critiques, Kennedy, Jaden, and Katya. This also checks out. What does not check out is Kennedy winning. Kennedy did a good job. She was funny with her facial expressions, with her singing voice that she puts on. But Jaden Dior Fierce was hands down the best in this challenge, with her Bianca Del Rio impersonation. Jaden winning this challenge would have been a great narrative decision as well, since she had just had a breakdown the week before, so seeing her come back so quickly would have been really great. But instead, she's just deemed high and sent off the stage. Now, the bottom 3 is Kandy, Pearl, and Trixie, and while I think Kandy had the weakest runway by far of the episode, I think she did okay in the spoof. Max, I think, was the real low placement for me here. She had an okay runway, but it had barely any green in it, and the prompt was green. And her performance as Courtney Act in the spoof was kind of nondescript and lackluster, and I really think she could have been low here over Kandy, but she just had more narrative cachet at this point than Kandy did, so it does make sense for them to be like, Kandy, why don't you take that spot? As for Pearl and Trixie, that checks out as the bottom 2. Pearl narrowly escaped lip-syncing the week prior and, was warned by RuPaul to wake up. And she didn't. Watching Pearl this season is so interesting, kind of knowing all the context that we know now, knowing of the traumatic life situation she was in at the time, what went down with RuPaul behind the scenes, her, shutting down and being so defensive does make a lot of sense. And it's not until she sends her close friend Trixie home that she starts to truly take advantage of the opportunity in front of her. But by coming back so hard in the next episode, she paints herself as the underdog, and we all know production loves an underdog. The 2 big questions: why does Kennedy win this challenge, and why does Trixie go home after very clearly winning that lip sync? I think they just wanted to kind of feed the flames of the opposing sides and keep the balance going. Jasmine just went home and Max just won, so now if we give the win to Kennedy, it evens the playing field again between old school and new school. Jaden isn't involved in this story, so her winning means nothing to the overall arc like Kennedy winning does. Also, it's a great comeback for Kennedy, who was just in the bottom, and, Kennedy's making amazing TV, so I'm sure they wanted to keep her around for a while. And then, Pearl was kind of the culmination of everything the old ladies hated about the young girls. They didn't appreciate her fashion, she wasn't bringing personality, and she doesn't have, an amazing performing ability on stage. By keeping her around, they fan those flames and upset the old ladies even more that Pearl is still around. And then, the flames continue to get fanned after Max and Pearl double win the next episode and Kasha goes home. It's really ping-ponging back and forth, giving each side a win and then taking it away the next week when one of them gets sent home. Episode 5, the one I just mentioned, is the Despy Awards. It's a big episode for Miss Fame and for Violet, who kind of overcome their rivalry and begin the path towards Violet's redemption arc after she's voted Shadiest Queen. I forgot just how much Miss Fame is on this season. Basically, every episode in this first half is about her and her backstory and her issues and her struggles. I mean, this show really puts a lot of time into showing us all sides of her. The emotional side, the complicated side, the combative side, the talented side. She gets one of the most, I think, fully rounded edits on this season. And it's so nice to see her still slaying it out there in the real world, because she's so lovely. Again, I think this episode I probably would have judged differently. They name Kennedy and Jaden as high, but I think some other queens actually had funnier performances. But the real thing everyone talks about on this episode is Kasha welcoming everyone at the start of the award show. I fully thought I was going to watch this and be like, oh fuck, Kasha Davis was robbed, but I don't think she was. I think people remember that as the only flub in her performance. And, they call her robbed because she's so lovable. But I think her performance overall was kind of flat. There weren't many jokes. And if Katya didn't have a hilarious speech later in the episode with her swollen vagina, she also could have been in the bottom 2 with Kasha. Because their opening monologue was clunky. It was awkward. Not many jokes landed. So yeah, but I mean, Kandy also struggles. She ends up in the bottom 2. And, narratively, you'd think it would be her time to go. She has no storyline. She has no presence on the season. But damn, does she destroy that lip sync. I mean, this definitely could have been a double Shantae if the show cared more about Kasha Davis, but they didn't. Kandy doesn't really have a lot of screen time, but I feel like she gets the same amount, if not more, than Kasha. Kasha maybe says like one thing per episode. She really is just a member of the Old Lady Brigade, and that's it. She becomes such an icon, to the fandom now, but she really does not get much of an edit on Season 7 at all, which was surprising to me watching it back. We lose Kasha Davis, and the next episode is the Ru Hollywood Stories episode, which I think is one of the funniest concepts for a challenge in Drag Race history. Having Ru, Michelle, and Merle Ginsburg all telling their side of why Merle got fired is hilarious. Now, this episode is all kinds of messed up, to be honest. They judge it in teams when I don't think they should have, and the placements I think are pretty wrong. So let's just go over each group. Group 1 is Ginger, Katya, and Kennedy. Katya does a really funny job playing Merle Ginsburg, but Ginger is the scene stealer here. She's playing Michelle, so terrifyingly funny, and delivering such a hilarious runway as well with the Death Becomes Her prompt. And then there's Kennedy, who, I think struggles as Ru. The struggle is real. And I don't think she gives her much personality at all. And then on top of that, we have the iconic, he had gutted me, but I didn't die. I had crystallized. And now I'm a glamazon bitch ready for the runway. That will never get old, even a decade later. So that's group 1. Mixed bag, but, Katya and Ginger both did a good job. In group 2, we have Violet, Max, and Pearl. Now, Violet and Pearl both do fine, especially for a comedy acting challenge. But Max had one of the best performances of this episode. Playing Merle as this weirdo nutcase, it was awkward. But it makes sense since the skit is from Michelle's perspective. So, she gets critiqued negatively for this later. And Ross even tries to stick up for her and is like, I was there, I got what she was doing. But, that didn't really seem to do much. The last group all end up in the bottom. And it's Jaden, Fame, and Kandy. Now, Kandy does not a good job as RuPaul. And Jaden has the same kind of breakdown that she had during Shakespeare, but, Max isn't there this time to comfort her. And instead, Fame is also having a breakdown and, turning the filming process into a therapy session. They are a mess. But they leave in poor Jaden's worst moments of the skit, things they clearly could have left out if they weren't trying to put her in the bottom. But the problem here is that Kandy Ho needs to go. She's been killing the lip syncs, but she's not involved in any of the drama or any of the storylines going on, at least from, what we've been shown. And we know Miss Fame isn't about to take her out to a Ariana Grande song. So Jaden has to be the one to do it. And, apparently they edited out a lot of Kandy's best moments from this lip sync. So it's giving double Shantae, and if they cared about Kandy Ho, they probably would have done a double Shantae, but they didn't give a shit about Kandy Ho. So she goes home. And they also didn't give a shit about Jaden Dior Fierce, so they see no loss in, throwing her into the bottom for no reason. Not saying no reason. She deservedly could have been low, but Fame was much worse than her in this challenge. Also, they read her runway as being a step below everyone else's when this is one of the most unique, fun, conceptual looks there is on this main the Riggory of Jaden Dior Fierce is like a whole video upon itself. But for the winner of this challenge, listen. I love Kayta. Probably not as much as some of you weirdos do, but I love her. But this was not her challenge to win. I mean, Ginger dominated that scene in every sense of the word. But Ginger has been doing so well. Oh, she already has a win, and Kayta had yet to get one. She, had a couple good weeks in a row, but she just fallen short every time of getting that win. And I think that they gave her this to kind of get her name on the board as like a front runner. And that just kind of like seals the deal, So, I'm going to get some like crazy Kayta fans in the comments reading me for that, but whatever. This is also the infamous episode where Michelle tells Max she's getting impatient, waiting for her to change her hair color. And, I think that's the main reason Max wasn't in the top this episode, despite her smart and funny Merle impression. And, this stunning runway. Max, to this day, is a Drag Race anomaly. She wins 2 challenges in 5 episodes, and then swiftly goes home in episode 7. Never to be on the show again, not to be seen on social media for a while after that. Now, she's shown her disdain for WoW and how she was portrayed on the show, specifically the singing bit right before she goes home, which was staged by production. But even before that, her edit is weird. We get a lot of negativity from other people about her. Ginger hates her fake accent. Kennedy hates her drag. Violet hates that she's such a prude. It doesn't seem like anyone likes Max. We never get those confessionals saying how nice she is or how great she is to work with. Even when she helps Jaden through that moment during Shakespeare, we don't really get a lot of content like, oh, Max really saved us, or Max is a great leader. We only hear about what people dislike about her. And maybe this was to kind of prep the audience to accept her shocking exit just a little bit. But the next episode is Max's untimely demise, which is the Snatch Game. The trend of pushing Kayta and rigging against Jaden continues. Kayta did a fine job in Snatch Game, but Pearl's Big Ange is still talked about to this day as one of the best Snatch Games ever, and definitely one of the most underrated. Although at this point, with so many people calling it underrated, can you still say it's underrated? I'm not sure about that. But Jaden, also as Raven, didn't do great, but Fame was much worse as Donatella. Versace or Versace, it depends on where you come from. But, maybe they thought Fame versus Max to No More Lies would have been a double sachet. But, Max ended up not doing a bad job, so maybe she sends Fame home anyways. I don't know. Regardless, Jaden eats up the second lip sync she shouldn't have even been in and sends Max home. As for the winners, we have a tie between Ginger and Kennedy, and in this case, I agree. They both did a phenomenal job as Little Richard and Adele. They were able to play off each other, since they were sitting next to each other. It all worked. I mean, this is literally one of the best Snatch Games ever, which is surprising since there was a lot of fashion girls here. But even the safe girls, Pearl and Violet, I thought did a good job. As we get into, the tail end of the season, we have the Makeover Challenge, which is extra juicy since all the eliminated girls come back and get a chance to come into the competition for a second chance. I really thought they brought these makeover looks from home because these looks, they seemed way too good to be made in the workroom. Well, most of them. But on the rewatch, I was like, oh damn, okay, they made these. So Kennedy wins the mini challenge. She gets to assign the partners. I'm sure they picked Kennedy for this since they thought she would be more shady with her assignments, especially since Katya, I thought, was the clear winner of the mini challenge, and she definitely wouldn't have been shady. So it just makes sense to go for Kennedy instead. But, I mean, the only person she really screws in her choices is Jaden, who has the impossible task of having to be a conjoined twin with Tempest. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, they have to be conjoined twins. This challenge fucking eats. I love this challenge. Pearl and Trixie are the obvious winners here, and it finishes that kind of mini storyline so well. Pearl and Trixie were good friends from Chicago. We don't really get much focus on it in the season, which I wish we had, because it would have made Trixie's elimination and eventual return even more emotional, and it kind of alleviates Pearl's guilt that she had for sending her friend home. So that storyline, put a pin in it, we're good. We also see great performances from Kasha and Katya, but let's be real, they were not going to bring Kasha back. They barely cared about her ass when she was still there. So the big rigging moment in this episode is Miss fucking Fame. She actually comes up, and not to sound, that made it sound shady. Okay. She comes up with a really fun, campy idea for the conjoined twins. And they're these, like, obsessed with vanity, trying to tear each other apart. Or maybe they're trying to stay together because they have, like, staplers. I'm not sure. It's really cool. But she gets the critique that this has been done before. The kind of, like, plastic surgery gone wrong thing. I mean, I think ideas are done over and over and over again on Drag Race all the time. As long as you bring a unique perspective and find a way to elevate it, I don't see a problem with that. And I think Fame does both of those things here. There were so many episodes I felt like they saved Fame from, going home or like being in the bottom two. And then here, I felt like this was the perfect moment to put her in the top, give her some praise. Instead, she's critiqued negatively. So I don't really get it, especially when you have Kennedy and Jasmine, who went the safest route possible in this challenge and was still safe. And I mean, Violet and Max also pretty much did that as well. Fame having this out-of-the-box concept for sure has to be better than these two boring looks, right? But regardless, Ginger and Jaden are in the bottom, rightfully so, and Ginger sends Jaden home. And, Jaden's storyline for the season was her struggle with her family accepting her. They knew that she did drag, but they weren't fully on board with her being gay. It was kind of something they just ignored the fact. They all knew it, but they were just like, let's not talk about it. And, Jaden says something along the lines of, like, all I want is to be accepted. And we see that, even if I think she had kind of a premature exit this season, in the finale, that storyline gets wrapped up when her mother sends in a video saying, I love you. Regardless, we'll figure this out. Everything's going to be okay. So, Jaden, I don't think her story was ever about winning or, being in the competition. It was more about her anxieties about herself, about how she's perceived, about what she's doing with her life, and just wanting that acceptance and that, like, you're doing a good job. And at the end of the day, she does get that. So that storyline does get wrapped up. Jaden goes home here. We move on to the kind of second half of the season, which is rocky for Ginger Minj, who up to this point, she's really shown no weakness, and I think came off as the pretty clear winner pick for the first half, before this makeover episode. But she completely shuts down in this episode. And, then we see her shut down again in the dancing episode. And I think that's where her winning chances started to dwindle a little. We'll talk about this more when we get to the finale, but the perception starts to be that any challenge that she doesn't feel comfortable with, she's going to shut down and not do her best. And that's not something America's Next Drag Superstar can be doing. Ginger has struggled on, all three of her seasons to get the fan support that it takes to snatch the crown. I mean, she's been in 2 finales and come up short twice now of the crown. And, that's so weird since she's one of the most successful, talented Ru girls, period. And, I talked about why she didn't win All-Star 6 in that Riggory video. And I think the reason she doesn't win this season is because of the Bitter Old Lady Brigade and because of her edit in these 2 episodes, the makeover and the dancing episodes. Because you have Violet and Pearl who kind of soften over the course of the season and take in new skills and new perspectives. But Kennedy and Ginger double down and stay in the same boxes they put themselves in at the start of the season. The audience wants to see a journey, and Kennedy and Ginger don't have much story growth. They share the same perspectives they did at the start, and they both get punished for it by getting chopped before the top 3, and then Ginger not getting the crown. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's go to the top 7 episode. Jaden is gone, and Trixie is back. And we have another comedy challenge. This time the iconic John Waters challenge. It was so lovely to see him on the show. And, for the second week in a row, Fame was robbed. What a weird trajectory. Saved from the bottom multiple times early in the season. But then when she starts doing well, they send her ass home. Now, Fame doesn't do amazing in this challenge, but, as Divine in her skit with Violet and Pearl, she does the best by far of the 3. She's giving good face, she's giving good character, but then her critique is that it seemed like it was forced. So, when she does nothing in an acting challenge, she's critiqued for being flat. But then when she gives comedy and character, they say that she's forcing it. Like, what do they want from this woman? In reality, I think Pearl and Violet were production favorites at this point. Pearl was the underdog who started off bad. She clawed her way to 2 challenge wins. Violet was on her redemption arc that wasn't complete yet. Fame's story had kind of ran its course, and so it was her time to go narratively. On the other end, we have Katya, Ginger, and Kennedy, who, not shockingly, do very well, like they have in every single comedy challenge, and Trixie falls right into the middle, avoiding the revolving door curse that happens to most queens who come back into the competition. It's so weird seeing Trixie on the season because she really doesn't shine in any challenge outside of, the first 2, but she's such a mega superstar now. It's just fun to see her, humble beginnings. I mean, her return is kind of a dud only because she really has no ties to anyone left besides Pearl, but their relationship is barely focused on, and she's missed out on all of this storyline and story threads that have been developing, so she's just kind of there. She doesn't have narrative links. So that leaves her in narrative limbo. Her leaving doesn't change the story whatsoever. It doesn't affect anyone. Suddenly, she's friends with Ginger, but where did that come from? Who knows? It's just a thing. But yeah, this was the acting comedy challenge. This was the 3rd comedy acting challenge this season. And the big complaint of this season was that there were so many comedy challenges for a more fashion-based cast. So I decided to look at how many comedy challenges there were on this season compared to the last 2 seasons, season 6 and season 5. So 7 out of the 12 challenges on season 7 were comedy-based, where on season 6, only 4 out of the 12 were, and season 5 had 6 out of the 12. So it's higher than usual for sure. But, as we move on to the last couple of episodes, which aren't comedy-based at all, Violet really starts her endgame domination. So we have the Dancing with the Stars parody challenge. The queens are put into teams, and they have to do mashup dances as well as construct a gender-bent runway look, although that part is completely cut out of this episode and doesn't factor into the critiques, I don't think, at all. I don't think anyone really did bad this episode. Ginger and Trixie, I think, were for sure the weakest. I think Violet and Katya were probably the best, but this was a very close race in this episode. We also see Violet dominate the Hello Kitty ball, and, Katya's insecurities and her anxieties finally catching up to her. So there's no Riggory in this episode either. So let's just move on to the final main challenge where things get very juicy, the Born Naked music video. So this entire production of the music video was a mess. People are losing earrings and wigs, and it really paints Violet and Pearl in a bad light and kind of opens up the gates for Kennedy and Ginger to begin their tirade that lasts for the majority of this episode. I mean, let's just be real. It ruined any chances of Kennedy or Ginger, winning. They are so focused on knocking Pearl and Violet down a peg and proving that they are the better type of queen that they lose any perspective. Instead of showcasing themselves, they're trying to downplay somebody else. And I think that's what really loses both of them the crown. Because let's be real, Pearl 1000% deserved to get cut here. And Kennedy deserved a spot in that finale. But after her and Ginger's scathing speeches on the runway, narratively, it was so juicy to see it get thrown right back in their faces. I mean, Ginger's reaction when Kennedy gets cut is priceless. It's a good TV moment. And as a viewer who's now siding and relating with Violet and Pearl, it's a satisfying conclusion to this season-long storyline. So when we get to the finale, Violet is narratively the only winner option. I mean, I don't think Ginger had a chance after the narrative undercut her so hard, and despite her good showing in the finale, it's Violet saying that she is the future of drag that really sells herself to the audience and to the producers and to RuPaul. I mean, she has amazing finale looks. She has an amazing finale performance. Her final speech and, her development throughout the entire season lead to a clear Violet Chachki win from my eyes. I know that the rhetoric at the time was that none of the three seemed to be deserving winners. And I do think it's because that entire top four was made up of the main sides of this old school versus new school clique, which means most of the season involved them caught up in petty arguments and shading each other back and forth. After Katya leaves, there isn't a super likable queen left edit-wise, and that's why there was so much outcry over her elimination. She seemed like the natural person who would win the season. She would rise up against this old school versus new school petty shit, and she would be the one who took things from both and take home the crown. A likable queen who has done well, she's been on a journey, she's overcome obstacles. That's what we look for in a winner. But I think that's what makes this season so interesting once we reach those final 2 episodes after Katya gets cut, because it really feels like it can be anybody's crown, since the obvious winner choice is now gone. And I guess that is the complicated story of season 7. The producers rigged the show so that the most essential, complicated, and outspoken queens make it to the end, but then when the audience isn't rooting for any of them because of this, it leaves them in a difficult position. I love season 7, especially on this rewatch, and I think they do a great job of giving us a season-long narrative that focuses on a lot of the queens. Almost everyone gets a story and a moment to shine. I wish season 15 was more like this because, we're at top 7 at the moment of recording this, and I don't know what Anitra, I don't know what Marcia, I don't know what Selena or Lux's stories on the season are, besides them just being there and sometimes doing well and sometimes not doing well. In the end, I do think the right person won season 7 in the aspect of what the story of the season is about. And it's kind of unfortunate that a lot of the pageant queens who got cast after the season kind of get the negative influence that Ginger and Kennedy left behind and Jasmine. And the only way to get out of that mold is to be a pageant queen who's actually funny too, or who actually can do modern drag too, like a Trinity or a Jada. That's what I feel like we go into after this season, as we go into the VH1 era. That's what the narrative starts to be. And I think that it comes from this season. So I feel like I've talked about the season a lot. Let me know in the comments below what you think. What was, in your opinion, the most rigged moment? I'm excited. Literally later this week, a couple days from now, I'll be putting out how I think season 7 would have gone if it wasn't rigged. It's kind of a hard one to figure out because it's all over the place, but I'm excited. I really fucking liked this season. I really liked this season. And, now I'm kind of do I want to go back to season 8? I skipped over it because genuinely I didn't notice I didn't remember a bunch of Riggory like I know that season 7 had. I kind of just want to go back to season 6 into season 5. And, is that bad? Is that bad of me? Do you guys really want to see Riggory of season 8? Let me know. It'll be a while before we get back to one of these older seasons because I like to put some space in between these Riggory videos. So next one will be, after season 15's finale. And then we'll probably get into another Riggory video maybe a month or so after that. Thank you guys so much for watching. As always, thank you so much. I would love if you could subscribe. And if you are not, make sure you listen to the Rigged Recap. I've done some really fun episodes lately. I did one with Twink Trash on the ball. I did one with one of my favorite YouTubers, Nick DeRamio. on the recent, 50-50 interviews on season 15. I've had Jack Fett, I've had Bootsy, I've had Runner Eye. It's really fun. I really like getting to talk to all of these other Drag Race content creators. So enjoy that. If you want to see video versions of the podcast, as well as early access to videos and behind the scenes content, make sure you subscribe to the Patreon. Well, thank you all for watching, and I will catch you all in the next one.